So let's start our final part, the final part of our workshop. We have more or less 2 hours that we can use as we please. And the last speaker is Professor Yoneyama Masaru, Professor Emeritus of Nagoya University.
Okay.
Please.
Thank you. My research has always focused on the philosophy of Leibniz and Kitaro Nishida. So today's report will be concerned with that. When translating the expression into Japanese as an academic term in Leibnizian philosophy, it is usual to translate expression as hyoshitsu. We also translate representation as hyogen. And moreover, we translate perception as hyosho. I hope that those of you who know Japanese will take note of this fact with regard to my report today. Okay?
So can you repeat? Hyoshutsu is expression.
Expression, hyoshitsu.
Hyogen is representation.
Again, representation. See? And the perception as hyosho. Let's begin. Each simple substance that is monad is a perpetual living mirror of the universe. Un miroir vivant perpétuel de l'univers, wrote Leibniz. The monad reflects the world. On the contrary, even among monads, the relational soul or spirit, which is a superior simple substance, will express God rather than the world, as in the following quote. All the forms of substances express the whole universe. It can be said that the substances of beasts express the world rather than God, but that spirits express God rather than the world. Reading this quotation alone, one cannot help but think that expression, even if it is a function of the mind, has a passive nuance in the sense that it is reflected in the mind as if it were a mirror. However, there are cases in which Leibniz does not use the word express, but rather have a perception. As we will see later, there is some kind of distinction between expression and perception. And this distinction seems to involve some kind of active nature rather than the mere passivity that is often associated with the example of mirrors. Moreover, Leibniz acknowledged that the rational soul or spirit not only has perceptions, but also produces something somewhat akin to God's creation. As the following quote shows, it seems that the stage of activeness has been raised another notch. It is not only a mirror of the universe of creatures, but also an image of divinity. The spirit not only has a perception of the works of God, but is even capable of producing something which resembles them, though in miniature. It is well known that the terms expression, representation, and perception appear frequently in Leibniz philosophy. However, it is not always clear how these terms are distinguished and used in his philosophy. In this report, I will review the arguments in this field and discuss them in connection with Kitaro Nishida's interpretation of Leibniz, while also taking into consideration the distinction between these terminologies. First, we will begin by confirming Leibniz's thinking on these points. As mentioned earlier, when Leibniz says that each simple substance or monad expresses all other things and is therefore a permanent living mirror of the universe, the soul, or simple substance, is defined as the true one, une vraie unité. And this one expresses the many, that is, the objects. What is this true one? According to his view, the mind is under the general influence of all beings. That is, it is closely related to the many, in that it perceives other things in accordance with its own relationship to its own body. But the perception itself is based on its own inner principle, that is the one. And insofar as it perceives, it cannot be influenced by anything else, in the sense that it works in such a way the one has some kind of activeness, almost to the point of being called the active subject. A living mirror is different from a material mirror. Thus, in the life aspect, which is distinct from the body aspect, we speak of a gathering, la réunion, into the one. And in short, an active function is recognized that can be described as concentrating or condensing. Here, it becomes clear that the function of perception, although it certainly includes what might be called a kind of expression, is different from the passive nuance of expression in an object-like mirror. Perception, perceptio, is the expression of the many in the one, unum, which is very different from the expression that is possible in the mirror, which is not one in the strict sense of the word, or the expression in the bodily organ. However, if this is the case, we must ask how such a situation of gathering can occur. Leibniz's use of the point metaphor provides a clue to explain this. The one, l'unité, represents the many, even though it is indivisible and has no parts. Just as all the radii gather in the center of a circle to réunir. It is in this gathering, la réunion, that the marvelous nature of the senses, le sentiment, resides. The example of sensation is used in connection with the situation of gathering. This example reminds us of what Bergson wrote about color. That is the following sentence. Perception grasps infinitely repeated vibrations, such as light or heat, for example, and contracts them into relatively invariable sensations. The trillions of external oscillations that the vision of a color condenses to our eyes in a fraction of a second. This idea of condensation will be a major clue to understand the discussion concerning the concept of representation that we are about to develop. But first, let us follow Leibniz's argument to understand this gathering into one using the distinction of point as an example. First of all, I would like to confirm the fact that Leibniz understood the monad as what can also be described as a metaphysical point. It is different from the mathematical point, which, though rigorous, is only a mode, not a substance. The metaphysical point, the point of substance, is a real point with some vitality and a kind of perception. And the mathematical point is only a perspective from which the metaphysical point expresses the universe. In addition to this, Leibniz also recognizes a physical point. When a corporeal substance is contracted, resserré, its entire organ becomes, from our point of view, a physical point. The corporeal substance referred to here is a substance that has life, and it is the body that is the focus of attention. As is clear from the phrase, the entire organ. In other words, such a corporeal substance is an organism with a soul as its dominant monad dominant. And everything else is an aggregator, as is the corporeal mirror. That is a contingent one, unum per accidens, not one by itself, unum per se. Leibniz limits corporeal substance or composite substance, substantia composita, to living beings alone. That is, to the organic machine of nature. In any case, it is clear that the distinction is made between the shrinking of object and the gathering spoken of with respect to the senses in the monad. But it is also clear that the distinction is made with respect to the nature of the point itself. It is important then that a metaphysical point is understood to be located at a natural point in a way, physical point, in the way that the monad is always present in the world while having a body. This gives room to talk about the interaction of metaphysical points in the world. The simple substance, even if it does not have an extension, should nevertheless have a position within the extension. Taking full advantage of these arguments, Kitaro Nishida would develop his own thought, writing as follows. Leibniz calls the monads a metaphysical point, but I think of each of ourselves as a point of creation in the historical world. The emphasize again the reason why perception and expression are said to be so different is precisely because there can also exist expression in a mirror that is not one. However, what is called soul or a simple substance is considered to be the one, and even their expression is certainly possible. But in addition to that, perception is also spoken of. Therefore, it is better to ask, why is the word expression sometimes used in the one as well? The reason for this is Leibniz's argument that it is the nature of the soul to express what arises in the body, and that the series of thought is made to coincide with the series of bodily movement. The congruence, or rather correspondence, of these two series is what is being discussed. He is not concerned here with the action of perception, but with the content that is expressed by the correspondence between the two series, the series of thought and the series of movement. Note that although the body is mentioned, mutual influences through the body is not emphasized, but only correspondence is mentioned. In other words, each monad is limited to the action of perceiving, and there is a strong nuance that it is God who corresponds to the content of these perceptions. Certainly, activeness in the sense of perceiving is spoken of, and the content of that perception is secured by expression. However, it is a story of divine harmony without any real interaction between the two. Therefore, the active work of creation by the rational soul or spirit is not always clearly positioned. The production of new things based on interaction, in the sense that the spirit directly changes things, and conversely, things influence the spirit, is not mentioned. As Alan said, we are inspired to create when materials resist and collaborate with us. Let us also remember, as Georg Zimmer points out, that it is in these interactions that the resistance of the material is felt. And it is by struggling with this resistance that the artist creates. Please examine the following quotation. Baroque art is far behind classical art. In terms of the spirituality it evokes and the sense of life that overflows from within. This provides that the resistance of materials is not a bad principle that should preferably not exist, but is the only essential element and base on resistance that the soul can visibly imprint itself on. In short, even if activeness is mentioned in the monad, the concept of a pre-established harmony by God is overshadowed, so that the freedom and creation that allows each monad to truly demonstrate its activeness is not made clear. Of course, the question becomes, what is freedom in the first place? But for the moment, let us not go too deeply into that discussion. By the way, Leibniz, referring to Descartes' philosophy, recognized the activity of, I think, cogito, as well as the situation in which various things are thought by me, varia ame cogitantu, as a fundamental fact. From a Cartesian standpoint, the assertion of the existence of various things as objects thought, as well as the existence of the action of thought, is it's a very problematic approach. This is because Descartes would have thoroughly considered what it means for an idea to represent something. As in the following quotation, what does it mean for an idea to represent its own object? It does not mean, of course, simply unbracketing the object that has been bracketed by methodical doubt. As we have already seen in the usual understanding of the triangle, it reduces the idea to a physical imagination. Therefore, this representational character of the idea must be recognized in the search and discovery of the object of the idea. Descartes specifically calls this form of thought judgment, eudikia. Leibniz, however, skips such discussions and easily acknowledged the existence of objects of thought, as mentioned above. Of course, this makes it possible to consider the mutual expression relationship between the many as the content of thought and the various objects. The following sentence from the short article, what is an idea, quid sit idea, helps us to clearly understand Leibniz's position. The important point is that a model of a machine expresses the machine itself. A projection of a thing on a plane expresses a solid. A statement expresses a thought or truth. A numeral expresses a number. An algebraic equation expresses a circle or other figure, and so on. In short, one thing expresses another, not necessarily in the Cartesian situation of substance as an action of thought. But when there is a permanent real relationship, un rapport constant et réel between what can be said about one thing and what can be said about the other thing. So here is another way of thinking, which the concept of function in mind, which Leibniz took out explicitly for the first time in the history of mathematics. It could be said that the attitude of trying to go beyond Descartes in the field of mathematics emerges in the philosophical scene as a, so to speak, functional relation of the contents of perceptions between innumerable monads. As Cassira wrote, Leibniz is moving from substance institution to function institution. In a nutshell, it is as follows. Leibniz starts from the functional concept of the new mathematics, which he is the first to grasp in its full generality, and which he frees from all restrictions to the field of number and quantity already in the first conception. Equipped with this new instrument of knowledge, he approaches the fundamental questions of philosophy. Of course, that does not change the fact that the very foundation of the above considerations is the activity of thought. For example, in saying that the spirit is as much alive as the world itself, expressing and concentrating, as it were, the whole of the universe within itself, it is certainly an argument about the content of the whole of the universe, but it is the action of thought that condenses. It was the workings of thought that cohere. At the same time, Leibniz wrote the following. Since every monad is a mirror of the universe in its own way, and the universe is regulated in perfect order, there must also be an order in the being which represents it, that is to say, in the perceptions of the soul, and therefore also in the body, according to which the universe is represented in it. If that's the case, it is certain that the same distinction between action and content is considered not only for expression, but for representation. In short, when we speak of perception, expression, or representation, we may have in mind the existence of a subject who perceives, subject who expresses, or subject who represents. And we focus on such a situation, we emphasize that such a subject is the one. On the other hand, however, there are cases in which discussions related to the content of perception, expression, and representation come to the fore. Apart from the subject in question, and in such cases, the situation of the one is not paid attention to. In other words, there can be a relationship of expression and representation between objects that are diffused without regard to their gathering into a single object. This is the same as the relationship between the model of machine and the machine itself. Leibniz even goes as far as to say that the result expresses the cause, or that the extension expresses only the present state of affairs. But anyway, it is important to note that although the functional relation of expression is also spoken of between objects, the activity itself of perception is never spoken of there. In short, perception speaks only of souls, simple substances, and living beings. In other words, perception is understood to be an action that is not so advanced as thought, la pensée, but is given to every substance as a living mirror. In other words, it is not surprisingly not an extension, not an extended substance in Descartes' terminology, but something that is possessed by a thinking substance. On the basis of these ideas, Leibniz's distinction of pre-established harmony, Leibniz's discussion of the pre-established harmony is closely related to the mind-body problem after Descartes. And it should also be clear that matters such as expression, representation, and perception between mind and body are closely related to this. However, any further discussion would be beyond the scope of this report. For now, let us turn to the Japanese development of the concept of expression. Well, it is often said that Leibniz's idea that any monad is a perpetual living mirror of the universe is similar to the mirror lamp metaphor in the Kegon Sutra, one of the Mahayana Buddhist scriptures. Let me try to introduce it in my own simplified way. If a candle is lit in the center of at least two mirrors facing each other, or in some cases, so many mirrors that they fill the walls of a room, they will be projected as image of innumerable candles in each direction. The Buddhist meaning contained therein is nothing less than the cosmic law of interdependence. It can be called karma. In Buddhism, there is no substance in things, and everything is interdependent. By dismantling one of the central concepts of Western philosophy, substance, self-nature is empty, and things that are no longer themselves can exist only in terms of interconnectedness. In short, the differentiation and the dissimilarity between things that exist in the phenomenal dimension of existence, segregation, division of meaning, division of existence, viewed from the standpoint of their inherent emptiness. It is called karma. Note, however, the following remarks. It is precisely in order to justify the establishment of an unarticulated world without essence that Buddhism teaches the doctrine of karma. However, the theory of karma, no matter how theoretically sophisticated, is not without its shortcomings in practice. The things that we actually interact with in the real world have a firmness that cannot be fully explained by the theory of karma alone. Among the many schools of Mahayana Buddhism, I believe that Zen is the one that has tried to tackle this problem head-on and practically. In Leibniz's case, as in the Buddhist mirror lamp metaphor, he states that the universe is multiplied as much as the monad exists audibly. To use his own example, a city can appear in different ways when viewed from different perspectives. The question is, what do we understand the existence of the universe as a metaphor for this one city? In a word, the question is whether or not there is a substance left in it, which later became a serious issue to Kitaro Nishida. In any case, I do not wish to acknowledge here that there was this direct relationship of influence between the two schools of thought, the Kegon Sutra and Leibnizian philosophy. Some scholars, however, believe that Plotinus, who lived in the 3rd century AD and who would have had a great influence on Leibniz, had direct knowledge of the Kegon Sutra philosophy and may have been influenced by it. In fact, the following is said of Plotinus' philosophy. For immaterial things in general, the all things are in all things principle applies. This is a principle that in later Leibnizian philosophy, each monad is a living mirror of the whole world, and that each contains the whole within itself, but that the uniqueness of each stands out. The Kegon Sutra, a single coherent sutra, was established in the 4th century AD. But even before it was compiled in that form, several parts of it had already been established. Since this was around the 1st or 2nd century AD, it is impossible that Plotinus may have learned of this idea in Alexandria, Egypt, where it is said that a very powerful Buddhist commune already existed at that time. Toshihiko Izutsu, however, does not intend to emphasize the propagation of such an idea, but rather seems to think that this way of thinking is a universal, fundamental paradigm of thought. Kitaro Nishida's creative monadology was an attempt to summarize his own thought in his final years while referring to Leibniz, using Leibniz's mirror, a living mirror, and the metaphor of the mirror lamp in the Kegon Sutra as hints for the issues discussed above. Nishida's direction to thoroughly deepen the idea of expression, which Leibniz also used, becomes clear in his creative monadology. Nishida gives Leibniz one of his highest evaluations like this. I think it was Leibniz's greatest achievement that he described the relationship of the monads, which has no window, as an independent individual that determines itself to any extent, the relationship between the individual and the individual as expression. However, in doing so, the notion of expression in question, unlike Leibniz, no longer leans towards mere correspondence relations as typified by mathematical function relations, but is described by Nishida himself with his own terminology, expressive-actional, which suggests a direct interaction between monads. And the following quote is the basis of such a way of thinking. In Leibniz, the individual is thoroughly real. Individuals are unborn and immortal. They are created and destroyed only by God. Therefore, the source of the interrelationship among individuals can only be found in God. This is the reason for the idea of pre-established harmony. In contrast, I believe that the self-contradiction of the individual concept has not been deeply considered in philosophy since ancient times. Even if it has been considered, a new logic has not yet been constructed from it. The individual is an individual by confronting the other individuals. It is a contradiction, but it is only through such contradictory opposition that the individual and the individual are mutually individual. And it must be said that it is through contradictory self-identification. This is because they are confronted with each other through the medium of absolute negation. As long as each individual maintains its own self, it cannot be said to be confronted. With this kind of thinking, one can no longer find peace by confining oneself in the manner of an independent monad. Even so, if we dare to use the term monad, what is recognized is an innumerable number of monads entangled in intense interaction. Nishida clearly has Hegel in mind there, relating this argument to the dialectic mediated by absolute negation, and conceiving the logic of monadology as one that is not merely expressive, but expressive-actional. This is why creative monadology is also called dialectical monadology. In any case, Nishida thoroughly re-examines the active nature of the one involved in perception, which I have already mentioned. He goes on to assert that the individual that truly determines itself must, unlike the Leibnizian monad, not only perceive, but also expressive-actional. Nishida then goes on to assert that expression is not merely an intellectual matter. That being so, Nishida clearly writes as follows. Leibniz says that expression is to be subjectively intellectual, to merely reflect or symbolically represent, but to express must be to work expressive-actionally, to work as an individual thing in a dialectical world of the one is the many, and the many is the one. The individual in the world of expression works expressive-actionally according to Nishida. He also wrote that expressive-actional does not simply mean that the world is an expression of the self, but on the contrary, the self is also an expression of the world. Moreover, what is important to note is that the expressive-actional aspect goes beyond the perceptual aspect and includes the direct interaction between monads in a way that is quite different from the mutual influence of material objects and the mutual influence of body and mind. Thus, in the so-called logic of place, it becomes important to talk about the individual, many interacting in an expressive-actional manner without involving God, as Leibniz did. Nishida believes that it is possible for things in the sense of material objects to interact, but he does not believe that the intellectual and at the same time the willful element of expressive action can be considered in this context. Knowing and acting must be thoroughly expressive and creative. It must be both to express the world and to create the world. It is intellectual in its expression and willful in its creation. Our concrete consciousness must be self-contradictory action. The individual, while remaining an individual, negates itself as an individual. However, this negation of oneself is not simply a matter of dissolving or assimilating into something substantial, that is God, or the nation, moral substance, sittliche Substanz. As a whole, as if one were to efface oneself. This is because the whole, the general public, is also deprived of its substance. Let us also recall that Cassila pointed out the following. Leibniz says that it is a living matter of the universe, but from his inherent fundamental thought, there is no such things as an absolute object, which should be presupposed for the process of reflecting. But there is no such thing. At any rate, Nishida thus begins to speak not of an unborn and immortal monad like Leibniz, but of a monad that is generated and extinguished. Even the topic of despair is involved. Let me leave you with the following verse. In Leibniz's monadology, he did not consider anything dialectical at its foundation. He did not take a position that is more than comprehensible. The relationship between God and the monad is not paradoxical. The monad is merely perceptual. The monad does not despair. On the basis of this way of thinking, which is far from Leibniz's optimism, Nishida built a logic of place and eventually brought it to fruition in the concept of creative monadology. Thank you.
Yeah, Alessandro. Little question, if I can. In these 2 days, we always have talk about expression in a way that is a little bit different from the one that you proposed. And something that hits me is that you talk of expression as something that is intellectual. What do you mean when you talk about it, this intellectual aspect of expression?
As you know, Leibniz's position is truly, thoroughly intellectual. For example, he describes the expression using a mathematical notion of function. For example, map and ground, model machine and machinist. Two things as position from first. There are many things. At first, we have to understand relationship between two things that exist. But where is the place of willfulness, will in these consideration? The Nishida wants to describe the will side, not the intellectual side. So at first I use, but because I'm a researcher of Leibniz, so what kind of understanding Leibniz have of expression? But when Nishida uses the term expression, his understanding changes in the ultimate years of Nishida's life. He used two terms, expressive and expressive-actional. But many researchers on the philosophy of Nishida do not describe the difference between two. So I wanted to say something about the distinction of expressive and exceptional, using intellectual understanding of Leibniz and unsatisfying standpoint of Nishida to this consideration. So this report, okay?
Okay, thank you very much.
So just to have a comment, could be said that in this sense, Leibniz and Nishida are completely on the opposite point of view. So Nishida, Leibniz is intellectualist, rationalist, and Nishida is in the sense that, for example, I can take from Deleuze is an empiricist, basically. Because the Deleuze definition of empiricism is that first there is relation, and then the terms of the relation are just in consequence of relation. For Leibniz, as you said, at first there are things, and then we have to find how to put them in relation. No, probably it's not a case that Nishida started from you in this sense.
Yes, we can say, but I don't want to use empirism. Because empirism has a very bad news in the history of philosophy. So I don't want to use any used notions of the history of philosophy. So in my report, it's a little number of terminology. Yeah? So you can say that this is Nishida's point is empirism. Yeah, okay, but I don't want to use it. Okay. Yes, Deleuze also started the consideration from Hume. Empirisme et subjectivité. Oui, oui, c'est. But my standpoint is not using difficult terminology of history of philosophy. That's possible. Okay?
Yes, no problem.
Because I like Alan very much. Émile Auguste Cherchier, who did not use difficult philosophical terms in philosophy. Je suis un membre de l'association des amis d'Alain.
Another question, just to understand, when you use the word expressive actional or expressive action, is action sayo or koi?
Sayo.
So, 表現的作用。
表現作用的。
表現作用的。If there are no more questions, I want to put another question, but very, very egoistic. The Professor Yoneyama and Professor Hirose too. So, for example, you spoke about the concept of negation in
negation. Okay.
Of course, there is a relation with Hegel, as you said, and of course, Nishida is aware of the Western term negation when he uses hite. But what do you think about it? If I see the Japanese term hite, broadly, it doesn't, of course, it does mean negation, but in the sense that he is negation, ite is determination.
Okay.
So it's possible to translate theoretically hite in the case of Nishida, not simply as negation, but as indetermination. Today in the morning, we spoke about territorialization, deterritorialization. So I'm inclined recently to interpret Nishida negation similar to deterritorialization of the laws. Do you think so? Negation is something that, regarded to something that is fixed, make it fluid again.
Mhm.
In this sense of, if you want, on the one side, Buddhist impermanence, or philosophy of becoming. So do you think it's too much to say something similar to, related to late Nishida, or it could work? And also, Professor Rosa, do you think that translate hite as undetermination is too much, too free, too much fantasy?
It's good. Yes, it's wonderful. But as Japanese, no, I don't know if I Japanese or not. But in my case, when I see the characters they, I directly go to negation without analyze he they. But I think your vision on the two characters, Chinese characters in the Japanese text, is very singular, and I think you have to go in this direction to introduce something strange in Japanese, I don't know Japanese what, but Japanese context to blur a little bit. So I think it's, yes, I think in this sense, your proposition for me sounds very wonderful.
Thank you.
Sorry, the hite you have in mind is the one not with the he of hijo. Is the one the kyoki no ki desho ne? It's like,
But it means negation anyway. What also is interesting that affirmation, ko means allow. Allow determination. This is affirmation.
the point, yeah, I mean, the fact that negations, negative meanings, like in a language that is using xenographs, of course, I mean, you have like many different, like we, like European languages can put maybe like negative a or in, like these are semantically empty. And obviously when it's written, if it's written with a kanji, with a hanzi, we will always bear some kind of like, can be mu, can be he, like the other he, fu. But maybe what you're, because indetermination, you were proposing, no? Indetermination.
So hite suru as to indetermine.
To indetermine. Because that in, like if I were like an English reader with no access to the Japanese, it would seem like mite. So some mite, so as in not yet. So and so part of playing a bit, it would be something what you were describing would be something more like a determination.
Oh yes, would be, yes.
So like with
So the problem is to understand for me what is the role of negation in Nishida, in the late Nishida in particular. For example, Professor Yoneyama translated one passage of Nishida. The many are the one is the many. But actually in Japan there is no is. There is soku. So the problem is to understand what is strange for European people, strange term soku means actually. What is the role of soku? Is simply negate. For example, in your translation, it seems that affirms an identity, but it's not an identity simply, but what is this? So the problem of what is negation in Nishida, I think, is related to what we interpret the role of soku.
So, soku is very difficult to explain. But anyway, kite, negation, in the sense of Western philosophy, you can say that undeterminate, because Henri Bergson wrote in Evolution Créatrice that negation is a link of two affirmation. One affirmation is なんつったこれ向こうにやっちゃうとなんつうんだろう substituted by the other, by one another affirmation. So, but the another affirmation is not described subtly. So, today, second affirmation is not clear, so undetermined. For that as well. So maybe Nishida had a conscience about this argument of Bergson, because he read many books of Bergson. So, your question, your opinion is, what is a negation in Nishida's philosophy? But not only Nishida's philosophy, but also in, for example, Henri Bergson, the negation is undetermination.
Yes, because I think it's interesting also not only the relation to Hume that is common to Deleuze, but also the relation to Bergson. And in the young Nishida, in an inquiry into the good, when he is much more Bergsonist than and there is no negation at all. So the philosophy, the young Nishida is without negation. Then he starts to introduce the concept of hite. So in relation, of course, with Hegel, but he's Nishida Hegelian, so this is changed from Bergsonist to Hegelian. I think the jump is very big. So probably the sense of negation in the late Nishida is not simply Hegelian.
No.
So,
can I say, in fact, following the Deleuzian reference, in difference and repetition, that is 1968, so before the encounter with Guattari and very near to the books on Bergson in 1966. Deleuze describes the possibility of becoming without negation in this idea of a difference that repeats itself. And there is a passage very short and important, and he wrote the obstination of the thesis, referring to Hegel. So no antithesis and no synthesis, obviously. So it's always an affirmative movement. And this kind of operator become in Thousand Plateau, the book with Guattari, this continuously deterritorialization and re-territorialization. The first operator is deterritorialization, So there is a territory and there's a line of flight that opens up the territory, and then a re-territorialization that needs to be opened. And so there is maybe a destructive movement, but not obviously a negation in the sense of Hegel. So I don't know Nishida, but I will know it thanks to your gift. But maybe the
Don't forget the meaning of gift.
just
So no one has a question. I would like to ask Professor Yoneyama, how do you interpret that Nishida said that monads despairs? What is this kind of despair?
Despair. How can I?
How do you interpret this desperation in Nishida?
This passage is concerned about critical philosophy. When Nishida was reading the critical books, he wrote this passage. So in Nishida's mind, he had sympathy with Leibniz philosophy and also philosophy of Kierkegaard. For Kierkegaard, despair is very important notion, but Leibniz is very optimistic. So Nishida felt a kind of insufficiency in the philosophy of Leibniz, because God appears Deus ex machina, right? And there is no place of despair in his philosophy. So he wants to establish a kind of monadology using, of course, Leibniz philosophy and Hegel. But Hegel emphasizes the aspects of the one. But Kierkegaard emphasizes the aspect of individual. So many. So what can I synthesize or construct new monadology, new philosophy, and he thought. So this despair, the term despair, represented his insufficiency. Okay. Of optimism. My opinion. I am basically optimistic. Optimistic. Because Alan is optimist. Voluntarily optimist. Not naturally or above.
yeah.
So when I read the opus of Nishida, Nishida Kitaro Zenshu, I felt a kind of sadness. Sadness. It is not. It is not my philosophy. But Leibniz, too optimistic. No? So the main point is how to use my will, not intellectual, not to understand, my will. But in the history of philosophy, there is not so many places to voluntarism, like Descartes. Always rationalism. So I'm a researcher of Leibniz. So Yoneyama, you are a rationalist. No, I'm not a rationalist. No. Mere rationalist. So I want to install nature and the notion of despair in my philosophy, but not become mere pessimist. Okay? So I use Leibnizian philosophy and Nishida philosophy of Nishida and three partner philosophers is my main main element of my philosophy. So usually we do not talk about despair in philosophy, contemporary philosophy. Many philosophers, for example, philosophy of science, absolutely do not talk about despair. Even a nuclear accident, after nuclear accident, not despair. But we have to think about despair and also willness. The expression and expressive-actional, the notion of expression-actional of Nishida's philosophy is very important to construct this kind of attitude, I think. Okay?
But I can understand your talk in the context of Alan's optimisme de la volonté, pessimisme de la raison.
Oui, c'est ça.
If I can, regarding Nishida's attitude, I mean, working, there is a big premise, working in existentialism, when you say in contemporary time, not many people write about this kind of negative attitude or pessimism. Having read a lot of existentialism, yeah, I can say that you can find a lot of this in existentialism, but it is something that I don't like. So I think that existentialism, of course, is an heterogeneous current of thought, but to me, they all share a similar sensibility, I would say. What changes is their attitude towards this theoretical core that you can find in existentialism. So I don't like existentialist philosophers who emphasizes too much the negative aspect.
Too much.
And this is the reason why I appreciate Hersch, because I think among existentialists, she is the one who is more optimistic, I would say. As I was saying yesterday, she speaks of desire of restitution, which is different from nausea in Sartre, or shipwreck in Jaspers. I mean, he was her teacher, but shipwreck is a negative category, being toward death in Heidegger. So many examples. Anxiety in Kierkegaard. That said, I always give a lot of importance to the attitude of the philosophers, and I also try to enter in their mind. Hersch says miming. So doing their way again, she says, borrowing our freedom to them, to the philosopher that I read, so that we can do again, we can redo their path, and only then we can maybe judge or something. Reading Nishida, especially the first Nishida, and also something about the diaries, at least the few passages translated in English, because I cannot read them in Japanese yet. For a long time, I would say I won't be able to read them in Japanese. The idea that I have regarding this despair is that there is always this sort of, I wouldn't say negativity, I should find a better word, but yeah, a pessimist approach regarding some aspects, sometimes also some good aspects of his life, because when he describes the death of the first daughter, it's normal that he said he cannot be that happy. But I can feel this something. I perfectly perceive this something missing since the beginning, also in his approach to Zen. So when he has this enlightenment, he's still not satisfied. There's always something missing. This is the impression that I have. So yeah, my question is, why, if you have an opinion regarding this feeling, this sensibility that Nishida had, because I still didn't find an answer to this, but I don't know that much about him. So yeah, if you perceive the same thing and if you have an answer to this.
Hiai って英語で、is difficult. I translated it into Italian with mestizia.
Okay.
Mestizia. Mestizia is a strange word.
Mesto is someone gloomy, sad. For example, you use mesto when you go to a funeral. There is this atmosphere which is mesta, so a bit sad. No?
In Japanese, hiai, ne? Many researchers on philosophy of life and philosophy of Nishida emphasize that Nishida's philosophy is philosophy of hiai. Beginning of his philosophy is hiai, not Tauma Zen.
Yeah, also Nishidani will say something even stronger in this sense.
Because he lost sons, those. I'm sorry. So he uses the term despair as not superficial, but from inner sadness, truth. But I want to emphasize that his last philosophy is creative monadology. So he does not remain in the sadness or hiai always, but he wants to express, or he wants to construct a philosophy of creation, and human creation and social creation. So if he follows the philosophy of Leibniz only, or philosophy of Hegel only, he could not construct the creative monadology as survive from hiai. So But I don't think that his attempt to construct the creative monadology had succeeded, not a success. He imagined, he wants to construct, but he could not write en detail, détaillement. He could not write the system of creative monadology. He used the term creative monadology. My monadology is creative, not the perceptual. He repeated these things, but he could not write away a full system of creative monadology. So he could not have success to survive from despair. This is I would like to say this also to the philosophy of Buddhism. Philosophy Nishida also pointed out that Buddhism emphasized always sadness. But I want to, he said, I want to say something creative using Buddhism philosophy. So I'm constructing a kind of creative monadology by using the aesthetical aspect. I called it monadology polyphonic monadology. We all have to create such a kind of your philosophy using Buddhist standpoint or Western standpoint. Both.
Lorenzo?
Since you mentioned Hiai, that he for me is a very, very interesting. So, and maybe it could be not an answer, but a way of going deeper in the question of what's negative about philosophy. It's not just about Tamazin, it's about paradoxical. So it's about a negation of the functional consciousness we need to live in society. So like negative emotions, like losses and like realizing the emptiness of everything, like not just like ontologically, but like emotionally, ethically. And in Buddhism, I mean, that's Hiai, but also it's Jihi. So the same, I mean, the same kanji, yes, but it's the kanji that has been chosen to like translate karuna, which is the compassion.
Compassion
of a bodhisattva or a Buddha. So like the fact that like that kind of negative sadness, like this kind of mestitia is at the same time a basic component of our compassion for other beings, for like the ability to negate like the negative element of consciousness, not just on a logical or ontological level, but like as a recognition, has an emotive level. Like Nishidani, when he's saying that sunyata is also like it's a mood. So the kind of like emptiness is by first empty that I can enter in a certain kind of relation. It's just not ontological statement. And so like by being able, so but having the kind of like sense, so this sadness, which is also compassion, for me is the end of like the idea of an independence. So So like the problem with the kind of like with our monadology, like at least in the sense of Leibniz, I don't know about Nishida, is that if it's complete, if the monad is complete, it's full. But to be close is to be haunted. Also in an emotional sense, like in the Latin sense of like contento, like full, but not missing anything. And then there's no space for emotions, not just for sadness, but also for compassion for other things. So it needs to be opened by this fundamental lack. Might be avidya, might be like a kind of fundamental Weltschmerz, some kind of. So, and I mean, Nishida might get that from both. It's in Kierkegaard, it is in Zen very much, but compassion and sadness are the same thing. They belong to each other. Hiai and Jihi.
Hiai and Jihi. No, there is a distinction between Hiai and Jihi.
For the people who doesn't know Japanese,
we know Japanese.
yes, he is kanashi or something that's said, and is written as negation of heart. And I is aware. Aware is an originally an onomatopoeia to express a feeling. Aware, and jihi is he is the same sadness, and ji is something like benevolence or take care. And this is the Chinese translation of karuna. It is Buddhist compassion. But so Nishida doesn't use jihi. He said the philosophy started from hihai, from this kind of. I translated mistete because I wanted to avoid the tristezza because my Spanish background. So I searched another term. Just to explain what we are talking about.
だから、悲哀と慈悲。悲哀 has a nuance of passivity. 悲哀。Accidentally, I feel 悲哀。慈悲 is willfulness. 観音の慈愛。安世音菩薩の慈愛。慈悲。
So it's the attitude of the bodhisattva towards the suffering.
So there is.
Or someone entered with probably with someone Mr. Albademeo, maybe you have the microphone on. Okay.
そういうことです。
So, please continue.
Today's my report. I didn't use triptych of substance, but in the base of my report, this notion is very important. Leibniz monad is substance, simple substance. But Nishida's monad is not substance. Nishida's substances can interact directly. But Leibniz monad cannot interact directly. Influence réelle, non. Real influence. There is no real influence between Leibniz monads. But Nishida's monad has this kind of interaction, influence. So, jihi, hiai, Jihi, Jihi has, from Bodhisattva. In Western philosophy, God. But Hiai and midlight っていうのかな、共に悩むっていうのなんていうのかな、うん、それは、not this is not 共に悲哀 midlight in Leibniz philosophy. No. But in Nissan's philosophy, yes.
To conclude our workshop, I think it's more or less time to go to an end. Also because together with Alessandro, we were planning to possibly make a book or something, so that something remains of our encounter here. So I ask you, if someone of you found a line that can summarize all the talks that we had. So the title was Expression in the Unmaking. And I had a lot of different interpretation of expressions. I wonder if there is a common line except the word expression that could unify. My impression is that the beginning of Felice's talk, so I'm making dualism was more common to our thoughts in the concept of expression itself. But this is only my opinion. And if it were the case, as Daniel said, we are a minority to this point, starting point. But what is your impression of this workshop?
The Jewish word for babbling in foreign language.
Motion. Balbettio.
We tried to find a common ground starting from very different points of view. And it seems that I come back to Rome with the idea of, with the importance of relativizar, to relativize, I don't know. To assume a different point of view about myself. Maybe this is the most important. And all this discussion about words in the language, that in one of the languages that I do not know, it makes me aware of such the continuous temptation to transform our point of view in the unique point of view. And situation like this, it's clear that it's not the case. So I found it very interesting and very thinking provoke new things. For example, I didn't know the importance of Nishida. I absolutely want to study it, at least in the Italian translation. It's not in the original, but thinking means translating. So I think that even if I do not know Japanese, I can know your idea through your translation. So I know the importance of the original language, but in another sense, I can. Thinking means translating every time. So I think I hope that I can catch something of Nishida. So for me, it's been a good chance for thinking new thoughts.
It could be the Kafka's word could be the title of the book.
And this one is the image of the book.
The cat. Okay, we have to take a picture before it disappears.
Maybe not, we didn't unmake expression, but for sure there was a multiple act of decentering. So by not taking our own mean, but to be expressive means also already losing some balance, no? Having that taking an action that it's going outside of what's in with a monologue, with an inner monologue, and trying to make meaning outside of us, outside of ourselves, which also makes it available to other people, to other situations and other languages. So another D. The D of descending is another negation.
There are no other. I am trying to
think about
think
Sì.
a title, but
Grazie Alessandro e grazie Enrico.
The entire workshop was on Sandro and all the
thanks
organization.
to all of you for coming here.